सबसे पहले सर ये पूछना चाहूँगी कि under your stewardship, there is the first ever income survey that's going to take place in India. कैसे सवाल पूछेंगे आप कि भारतीय जनता आपसे सच्चाई में ये कन्फेस कर पाए कि इनकम क्या है? Because look at the number of people who actually pay income tax in this country.
Surprisingly, the income survey is going on and the progress is extremely good. The kind of support and cooperation that people are giving, it's even exceeded our expectations. And you asked why are we doing this? Is internationally, if you look at it, a number of countries do it to get a better sense of how the income distribution is there in the country. And this was one data gap that was there in India. We had tried it back a few decades back. We did make attempts, but I think it was the fear of whether people will talk about it or not, and that held us back. But given the fact that we only use it for statistical purposes, in fact, when we go to any house, we say that we are not from any tax authority or an enforcement. We are from a statistical and only for data purposes, and we keep the data confidential. And I think that helps us to get better responses.
So what are the kind of questions that are asked in an income survey?
Obviously, there are some direct questions asked of what are the sources of income, whether agricultural, non-agricultural, from business, from other sources. There are some questions also of the kind of assets that are owned by the individuals and households. But the focus is on different sources of income. And we don't ask expenditure in this. There's a separate thing we do once in 3 years on consumption expenditure. And people do respond to it. And what are the kind of savings they have. We only ask round figures. We don't ask for very specific numbers in that sense. And at higher levels, it's more in terms of the ranges that we are talking about. So, as I mentioned, and I must thank the people for supporting it. And all surveys are useful to the extent that people participate in them.
Yes, they participate, but income is such a touchy subject. So I'm just trying to understand, do you believe what people are telling you?
So internationally, this is a issue. It's not local or specific to India. And that's why we also get some information of the assets. So it helps to get a kind of a triangulation done, a validation done of the kind of income that they are talking about. And there are methods, statistical methods to correct, make these corrections. And these are internationally used, and we would be also using those to ensure that the validation is there. And as I mentioned, you get a sense of the income distribution. And that is what is more important. What is the bottom decile? What is the top percentile? So that is what is used for policy making. We are really not interested in knowing an individual household, what is the income of that. But given the fact that for policy making, you want to have an idea of the number of people, let us say, in the bottom decile, bottom 10% of the country, so that one can look at what policies are needed or interventions are needed.
Sure. One big change that everyone's talking about, and it's something that you have overhauled, is how India reads its own economy. For someone who's not an economist, what has changed? For the ordinary person, what has changed?
There are 2 or 3 macroeconomic indicators which are internationally, universally used to understand an economy. When anyone talks of how is that economy doing, you ask for the GDP numbers. That what is the size of the economy, what is the growth of the economy. Another question you often ask is what is the inflation rate, how much are prices rising. And this is GDP, CPI, Index for Industrial Production. These are some statistics which are used to compare different countries. So what we have done is that, and each is compared to a certain base year. The base year was 2011. We have updated that to 22-23. And it's not that the realization was not there that this needs to be done, but certain external factors, for example, COVID came in the middle earlier, which prevented certain delays. And there were some questions being raised perpetually about Indian data, that the data sources are not robust, or some technical factors which is called deflators are not being used properly.
Right.
I think we made it transparently clear what is the data source we are using, how we calculate, and I hope that clarity has come in everyone that there is nothing that we need to hide or suppress. Everything is out there. In fact, we discussed with a host of academicians, forecasters, that this is what we are planning to do. You please suggest if there's something better methodology that you have. Because all these requires certain background methods of working, and I think we've been able to convey that, and we've also incorporated feedback that we have got. And that is one thing which I just want to again say, that there is no reason to doubt the data that we produce now, or in fact what we were producing earlier. We are very transparent and we disseminate it extensively.
So since you mentioned doubt, I have a few questions around that. So when the base year was changed and the new data was released, our growth rate went up 7.6%, but the actual size of our economy went down. So were we never as rich as we were told that we are?
So let me, number one, the growth rates that we have seen in the last 3 years when we changed the base to 22-23, all three have been over 7%. There were slight ups and downs. It was 6.5 became a 7.2, or a 9 became a 7.5. So those were methodological changes that happened. But we remain the fastest growing economy in the world. We were the fastest growing, and we continue to remain even in the revised methodology. The change that you are talking about, the dip, was that the size of the economy is about 2% less than when we are talking about the overall size. But a 2% less when we are in a size of 1 lakh crores of economies, that's the level that we are talking about, is not something which really substantially changes the fact that we are growing fast, and we will continue to do that. So it's a slight correction, I would say, and not anything which is substantially different from what happens internationally. Internationally, we looked at data of some 60 countries who had revised the base year over the past decade, and that differences or the change in the base year varied from, let's say, minus 10% to plus 20%. Ours was a minus 2%. So we're very well within the range of what happens when such changes occur.
So I'm going to press on that a little bit more, because on the global stage, there have been doubts about the data that India comes out with. We are pitching to be the next great economic engine. But some of the sharpest minds and institutions have questioned our data. For example, IMF still puts an asterisk next to the numbers that India produces. The government's former chief economic advisor had actually published research arguing India's growth was overstated by about 2.5 percentage points every year. And he put real growth closer to 4.5% as opposed to the official 7%. So there is a credibility deficit. How are you looking to fix this credibility deficit?
So let's first talk of the IMF asterisk, as you mentioned it. I think the asterisk was only on the basis of the fact that the base year was more than a decade old. In fact, we've put it out in the public domain, and the IMF, we've had discussions with the IMF. They have a constraint that if that base year is, we had of 2011-12, it's more than 10 years old, that they put a question mark that this needs to be revised. There was never any doubt on the numbers that they have raised. What the second researcher that you mentioned, they have questioned the growth rate. And I think this is something that both the CA and myself have written in the newspapers in reply to that, that there are two areas where the questions was raised. One on the data sources, that the data for the informal sector was not being not being calculated in the right manner. And the second one was a technical one on the deflator that is used to bring current prices to constant prices. That was that could have been different. All that, both those, I don't want to get into the details of that, but on the data sources, we use, now we have, for example, an informal sector survey we do annually, and we are using that data for the calculation of the GDP. And had the data been so off that it was 2 or 3% per year, over a period of 10 years, the size of the economy would have been overstated by 30 or 40%, which was not the case. When we have revised the economy, there was a blip of only 2% compared to the 30 or 40% that is being talked about. So I think the fears have been overstated, and I think we need to believe in ourselves that the data that we are producing, and that's the reason we have brought out everything in the public domain, and every step we have done public consultations in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Chennai with academicians. And we would be very happy to engage again if required, if there are any doubts, and we would be very happy to clear them.
Well, there's certainly been a lot of positive changes in the way that you're overhauling data sources and methodology. But I'll come back to that question of credibility, because we are talking about good data, making good policy. There are a huge number of independent economists who have spoken about, and we have to read between the lines here, that when the data is not painting a flattering picture for the government in charge, it is hushed.
So I think, and that's why I would say in the Ministry of Statistics, we bring out what is called an advance release calendar. And we bring it out that we will be bringing out the CPI data on the 12th of every month, which globally is among the best international practice. We bring out the Index for Industrial Statistics on the 28th of every month. Every quarter, there's a fixed time when we bring out the GDP figures. And I think that is one step that we have institutionalized to ensure that the advance release calendar is met, so that these kind of issues which might happen, that it is not being brought out on time, get taken care of. In fact, we have been focusing on the timeliness of publication of our survey results, our other indices that we bring on regularly. And we are working with other ministries and departments also in this context.
So Dr. Garg, you're talking about the timeliness of the release of data, but people are questioning that the data that is not flattering is actually hushed. So those are two different things.
So if data which is stated to be brought out at a particular time is being brought out regularly, I think that issue of not releasing that data should not be a question. And what is more important is that that data is available in the public domain. And that's why we have institutionalized these data user conferences to discuss with academics, with researchers, that if they have any issues on the data, on the macroeconomic data of the country that is being brought out, we would be very happy to discuss with them and ensure that any doubts are taken care of.
Okay, fair enough. Like I was saying, there are many new things happening under your leadership. We've already spoken about the income survey. There is also a services survey that is underway. Can you tell us why you thought it was important, and what kind of data points are you hoping to get?
Sure. So if you look at the industrial picture or the GDP, industries is one component, agriculture is one component, and services is one component. And services now are more than 50% of the economy. This was a data gap that we had, that we have adequate data on the agriculture side. We had the index for industrial production and other manufacturing indices. But on the services side, we were not bringing out a regular index. And that's what is the gap that we are filling in. One, by soon bringing out an index of services production. And the second is having an annual survey of the service sector enterprises. We have an annual survey of industries, which takes care of the manufacturing sector. We have an annual survey of the unincorporated sector enterprises, which looks at the informal sector. But this was one gap that we have, so that we get a better sense of which kind of services are growing, what is the kind of employment growth that is happening, what is the value addition in that sector, so that it gives an indication to any private investor or even the government to get a better sense of what needs to be done if there's an intervention required, where would investments, private sector can look at where investments are required, where skilling might be required. So these are the kind of questions that we would be able to answer with the services sector survey and the index that we will bring out.
Sure, डॉक्टर अगर महंगाई की बात करते हैं कि इन्फ्लेशन के नंबर्स जो अभी आए, we saw that you've actually reduced the weightage given to food items in the basket from about 46% of the basket to down 37%, because Indians supposedly are buying less food. Because I ask this question because that is where, when you see the kitchen and when you see the dinner table, that is where महंगाई pinches the most. और आपने खाने की जो वेटेज है, फूड आइटम्स की वेटेज, वो ही कम कर दी है बास्केट में.
तो ये हम हर 3 साल में एक हाउस होल्ड कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर सर्वे करते हैं. हमने 22-23 में किया था और 23-24 में किया था. तो इन दैट वी सॉ दैट व्हाट आर, एंड दिस सर्वे कॉन्स्टिट्यूट्स बोथ फूड एंड नॉन फूड आइटम्स, एंड जहाँ पे बढ़ोतरी हुई है इज इन एरियाज लाइक कन्वेंस, इन ट्रांसपोर्ट, इन कम्युनिकेशन. That's where the expenditures have increased. Where there has been a substantial fall in expenditure is in fact in cereals. In cereals, there has been a halving at the lowest decile even. So around 10% of the budget, it has fallen to less than 5%. Where expenditure has increased in food items is in milk products, fish, meat, fruits. So there has been a rise in the value addition, if I can put it, on more higher value products, which in a way reflects the fact that the incomes are increasing. Internationally also you see, as income rises, the proportion of expenditure on food reduces, which is to be expected because a person can only consume a certain amount of food even if they have higher incomes. So it's not that the food consumption has reduced, it's that the proportion of expenditure of food, given the fact that incomes have increased over the past 10 years, that is what gets reflected.
But how do you account for the informal sector? ये एक बहुत बड़ा वर्ग है हमारी इकोनॉमी का. And are there changes in methodology you've brought in now to capture data from that sector?
Yes, and there are 2 or 3 things we've done, and one is we do a periodic labor force survey, which we used to bring out quarterly or annually earlier. Now we bring it on a monthly basis because it's in the informal sector that a large number of people are employed or they work. So now we have on a monthly basis on the changes that are happening, what is the skill levels they have, and if there are any reductions or increases in the workforce participation, people are going out of workforce or entering the workforce. Now we have this data monthly, which earlier we used to have it quarterly for urban areas and annually for the country. The second thing that we now have, we do an annual survey of the unincorporated sector enterprises, as I mentioned, which gives us an idea of which are the areas where growth is happening more, what is the credit inflows in that area, and what are the kind of skill levels required. And the third point of data now which we have, which we didn't have earlier, which is the GST data. Because GST, though it is primarily for the registered or corporate enterprises, but even the smaller businesses, etc., which have a turnover over a certain minimum, need to get registered under the GST. So this has given us a much better sense. And I think I must say that over the past decade, because of the penetration of digital India, we have a lot of different sources of data which were not available. We have e-Vahan data, which gives us an idea of what is the movement of transport sector across the country. And I think this also flows from the focus which the Honorable Prime Minister has been given, that he stated that a number of times to civil servants when he addresses them, that we need to, whatever we measure, we will improve, and ultimately we want to transform that. Right. So given that focus on transformation, that need for measurement is really flowing from the right from the top.
I have 2 very brief questions before we wrap up. Number 1, is there a piece of data recently that has surprised you about India?
So I think this household consumption expenditure survey, which came out last year, I think that throw up one is food, which was Really, food used to be the major point. But interestingly, two other points, data points which have also come up, is that the ownership of vehicles of different kinds is now widespread. That's been really one of the fastest growing areas. And the second is the expenditure that people are spending on transport and conveyance has nearly doubled from what it used to be. And this is not only for purposes of recreation or tourism, it might also be for commuting to work or for other purposes. I think these are changes in the economy which have happened, which are extremely significant. And the third, if I can put, is obviously the usage of digital technologies, the usage of internet, smartphones, etc. It's showing up in the various surveys that we do.
Okay, final question, Dr. Garg. Should Indian economists, should the world at large believe every data point that India puts out?
So what I would say is that as a statistical means, you talk of 95% confidence levels. And I would say that the data that we bring out, we ensure that the error in that data is of a confidence level of over 95%. And I would like to mention that we are the fastest growing economy. Our revised data is showing it, and there is no reason to believe that we will not continue to be the fastest growing economy in the globe.
I think that's a fantastic note to end this session on. Thank you so much, Dr. Garg.
ABP Ananda, এগিয়ে থাকে, এগিয়ে রাখে।